If you make six figures and still feel broke, you're not failing at money, you're experiencing the invisible economics of modern life. $100,000 a year used to be a symbol of success. Today, for millions of Americans, it feels like barely enough to get by. And that shift isn't psychological, it's structural. It's rooted in how costs, wages, expectations, and social norms have changed over decades. Let's find out why earning $100,000 feels like poverty in 2026. There was a time when earning $100,000 put you well above average. Today, that number barely places you above the median household income, and in many cities it's just enough to cover essentials. According to national surveys, many Americans earning six figures still struggle with day-to-day expenses because housing, childcare, healthcare, and other necessities have grown faster than wages. One of the biggest reasons six figures feels insufficient is housing. The cost of rent and homeownership has skyrocketed in many parts of the United States. In expensive markets like New York and California, homeownership costs can consume nearly or more than 100% of a typical wage, meaning a six-figure salary doesn't stretch far enough to cover a mortgage comfortably. And it's not just buying a home, renting is expensive too. Census and financial data show that nearly half of renters in prime working age, 35 to 44, spend 30% or more of their income on housing, the benchmark for being cost-burdened. For many, rent alone consumes what should be discretionary income, leaving little left for savings, emergencies, or long-term goals. When you're spending such a large share of your income on shelter, even a six-figure salary starts to feel like a tight budget. Another invisible force is inflation, the rise in prices of goods and services over time. While wages have increased in nominal terms, prices for essentials have grown faster in many categories. This means your dollar today buys less than it did a decade ago. The cost of food, energy, utilities, and transportation has climbed steadily, and even when official inflation metrics show moderation, everyday lived experience often feels harsher. Nearly 7 in 10 Americans now report living paycheck to paycheck, and that includes many households earning over $100,000. When basic expenses take up most of your income, there's little room left for saving, investing, or building security, and that's exactly why six figures can feel like too little. Gross income, the number before taxes, can look impressive on paper. But what matters for your life is take-home pay. Federal income tax, Social Security, Medicare, and often state and local taxes take a substantial bite out of that six-figure salary. Debt isn't always visible in income figures, but it's a huge drain on take-home pay. Student loans, auto loans, credit card debt, and medical bills all subtract from what you can use for living expenses or savings. Even high earners often carry debt that absorbs a large share of monthly income. When a significant portion of your paycheck goes toward debt payments, it reduces your financial flexibility. That means fewer choices, more stress, and the feeling that your income isn't enough even when it technically is. The traditional American dream, owning a home, raising a family, saving for retirement, and having a bit left over for enjoyment has become more expensive. Surveys indicate that many Americans now believe you need well above $100,000 a year to feel financially comfortable, especially in high-cost areas. And when people compare their reality to that ideal, six figures starts to feel like a baseline rather than a benchmark. This shift in expectations doesn't make you ungrateful, it reflects how much the cost of living has changed relative to income. Here's the psychological twist. When people earn more, they often spend more. It's called lifestyle inflation. A raise leads to nicer apartments, better vacations, upgraded cars, more eating out, and suddenly, that six-figure salary feels like just enough. Social comparison amplifies this. You don't compare your income to the median, you compare it to what others around you have. If your neighbor in the same city drives a nicer car or lives in a larger home, your $100,000 starts to look smaller in your mind. This emotional layer makes six figures feel like barely enough, even when it technically covers your needs. Where you live matters more than ever. $100,000 in a rural area can feel comfortable. People point out that a six-figure salary that once felt aspirational now feels like middle class at best, especially in cities with high living costs and competitive job markets. This geographic inequality means the same income can feel very different depending on where you live, another invisible factor shaping how you experience money. Economists describe a group called Henry's high earners, not rich yet. These are households earning six figures but still struggling to feel financially secure. They're above average in income, but not wealthy in lifestyle or financial freedom. Henrys often find themselves in a paradox. They earn well, but they don't feel well off. They save little, carry debt, and have limited financial buffers. That's why $100,000 can feel like a trap rather than a milestone. Feeling financially insecure isn't just about numbers, it's about experience. Polls show that most Americans feel they can only afford basic necessities, and even those earning above $100,000 report that major purchases like homes or cars feel out of reach. This creates a psychological gap between your income and your perceived financial well-being. You might be doing fine by statistical measures, but if your everyday life feels like a series of trade-offs and compromises, you feel poor even when you're not. Part of the frustration comes from cultural memory. Past generations viewed six figures as a sign of success, a gateway to the middle class and financial security. But economic conditions have changed faster than our expectations. Many people still think of $100,000 as a life-changing income, because that's what it used to be. Reddit conversations reflect this generational shift. People note that $100,000 used to be aspirational, but now it's often just enough to cover basics. This mismatch between expectation and reality creates cognitive dissonance. Your income should feel good, but it doesn't. The reason this all happened isn't random. Over the past few decades, wages have grown slowly relative to the cost of living. Housing supply has lagged demand, pushing prices up. Healthcare and education costs have skyrocketed. Inflation has eaten into purchasing power. Debt levels have risen across age groups. These structural forces, not individual failings, shape why $100,000 feels like so little today. Official poverty statistics in the US are based on a formula developed in the 1960s that doesn't reflect modern costs like housing, childcare, and healthcare. When economists update that formula for today's realities, some estimates suggest the real poverty line for a typical family could be closer to $130,000 to $150,000 a year. That doesn't mean people earning $100,000 are literally impoverished in the traditional sense. But it does mean that the income needed to live without constant financial stress is much higher than official measures suggest. Another startling trend: a large share of Americans now live paycheck to paycheck, even those earning six figures. Nearly 68% of households report this financial strain, meaning most of their income goes to necessities and bills rather than savings or discretionary spending. That's the real economic shock. You can earn a lot of money and still feel financially insecure because the structure of expenses, expectations, and economic pressures has changed. So if you're earning $100,000 and still feel like you're barely keeping up, here's the truth. It's not that your income is worthless. It's that the costs of living, social expectations, and economic structures have shifted so dramatically that what once felt comfortable now feels stretched thin. You're not failing, you're adapting to a new economic reality. If this made you rethink what being rich really means, subscribe now, because we break down the hidden systems, real behaviors, and uncomfortable truths shaping your money and your future. Stay sharp, stay informed, and take control.